Some call me the Oracle. Some call me WhiteStar. PeQkwasel SeliyeTeSpoQes. Technically, WhiteStar Eaglevisions. I earn these names traditionally. I'm a pipe carrier, a lodge keeper. I'm a prophecy teacher. Right now, as a species, we are going through this amazing revolution. And you're a part of it. You know, way back in 2012 when nothing happened, so much happened. But they forgot to tell you. They forgot to show you. I'm sure you recognize the whole world is in a real interesting place right now. And the prophecies are clear that the past is coming to an end, is being dismantled as gently as possible, but definitively being dismantled. And you, as a human, are becoming so much more than you used to be. New chakras, frequencies, new energies, new awareness, new science. You want to keep up? Come hang out with me once a week. We're going to talk about some really interesting stuff. Weird is the new sexy, they tell me. So come on, let's get weird together. PeQkwasel. See you soon.
Let's get weird together, shall we? Some soul getaway spectacles. I just digging through an old, junk drawer. I'm sure we all have one. It's necessary medicine in any household. I come across these shades that, of course, they're so broken, they don't even stay in my ears anymore, kind of idea. But I want to throw them away because these shades, soul getaway shades, have been around the planet with me, literally. They've had so much, Caribbean water on them and salt and just the memories. Give me a second. Yeah, that's awesome. Good times. Good times. Any one of you that's watching this that was on one of those soul getaways with us? Yeah. And there's been so many over the years. Remember? Yeah, me too. It's all about the sacred and lots of spiritual and the growth and people fell in love that are still married, believe it or not, on these journeys. If you want, you can go to the current kind of incarnation of it at soulgetaway.ca. We'll get you there. It's a website that leads to some of the dances and pilgrimages that myself and Paula Hopwood and a couple other really cool people have been putting together over the last few years. But it really has evolved. This soul getaway, and it's interesting. It's pilgrimage, I would suggest, definitely is the word that I would use to describe it today. But I certainly wouldn't have started that way. It actually just started as just an opportunity to get away, because, well, as I'm looking out my window of my office here in Canada, it's snowing. Yeah, it was gorgeous last couple of days. I was out doing some gardening, preparing the space, moving plants and stuff like that, because it's actually better sometimes, believe it or not, at least I've been taught and told, to move these plants during the wintertime while they're still asleep. So that, when springtime hits, they wake up in just a new space. And, it's a whole lot less shock, a whole lot less, hardship on them. I'm wondering if maybe that's not a bad idea for me. There's a reason why bears just go to sleep. They wake up. I wonder how many bears just wake up in a different place. Probably not many, eh? Yeah, And so when it's cold and it's blustery and it's cold season and everybody's being that way, I like you, I suspect, you either want to curl up into a cave someplace or, you want to get out and enjoy some sun, and anchor into, that experience, which is better? I haven't a clue. I'm certainly not for you, but even for myself, which is better, I don't know. I'm in a really interesting place, just like so many of us, this last little while, the weird stuff. Let's talk about that first. Let's get that off the table. Timeline shifts, dimensional crashes, and I gotta tell you, I am busier at night than I am during the day these days. And as an oracle, as a wisdom keeper, as a gifted person, whatever label or phenomena you want to throw at it, my life is weird. Yeah. When I talk to people about it, here I am on a podcast, sharing it with you, which, in of itself is weird enough. But the fact that so many of you who know me already, who've known me for decades, and for those of you who are starting to just getting to know me, you on your side of things go, yeah, it's getting weird, even if weird isn't your normal. Like I talked about in the intro there, weird's the new sexy. And that's because, we've all got it going down. We've all got this experience that's taking place. And I really, really felt compelled at this time of transition for humans, at this time of evolution, revolution. It's time for us to get together and have some conversations about the weird. You know, um, I'll share a story with you. And once upon a time, one of my incarnations many years ago, I was actually a rancher. I owned a place called Ohm Haven Ranch, which in of itself was kind of weird because it got named Ohm Haven because Ohm, Om, Shanti Peace, OM version, means love. And of course, Haven means home. And so for me, stepping into Ohm Haven Ranch to name, the 80-acre estate that I'd, raised my family on, love lives here. Which is not typical for your typical rancher or farmer and, what have you. Some of the dynamics that took place on that space were actually in of itself, again, weird and unique and dynamic. I became a bona fide farmer, which it was on ALR land, agricultural land reserve. It was protected for agriculture uses, which I loved, nothing better. But it's interesting because I qualified as a farmer foremost from something I would call wildcrafting. And what that means is I was literally harvesting products and goods for sale that came from the woods, that came from that field that I didn't plow asunder. The weeds, literally, were able to provide enough of an income from that property in order for me to qualify as a bona fide farmer, which at the time I think was like 45,000 Canadian per year. You had to have this kind of income, literally, from sales from the property. Yes, we also had some other dynamics. I had some alfalfa bales, that we sold every year, but that didn't hit 45 grand. Yeah, we didn't have that much of it. And most of, to be honest, what we did manage to harvest and grow, stuff like that, I, shipped off to some local guy for silo, and we kept the good stuff for our own cattle, that we ourselves would eat. And this is kind of where I'm leaning in as far as the memory that got me talking about Ohm Haven in the first place was, I had this fella come out and he was going to buy one of my cows from me. Now, interestingly enough, this feller, and I should actually have my rancher hat on while I'm telling this story because it would be appropriate. So imagine, if you like, I've got this rancher's hat on. Worst comes to worst, a John Deere hat. Kind of idea. So anyway, I'm talking to this guy. Who's also a rancher, and we're hanging out at my barn, and he goes, I like what I see here. All this, he's eyeballing my herd, and everything looked in place, and there wasn't any three-eyed cows, and everything looked healthy and robust and all that stuff. And to be honest, one of the reasons that he came to see me specifically was, one, we had spent 4 years qualifying as certified organic. Now, between you and me, certified organic weren't nothing compared to what we were actually walking as far as our lifestyle is concerned. It only took 4 years because we had to wait 4 years to get our certificate stamp to be organic. But our everyday lifestyle surpassed anything that certified organic basically put on the list, right? We weren't using pesticides, and even none of our animals got none of that vaccination stuff, and antibodies and all of that stuff. We always used very from the land, natural dynamics. And, sure, every so often, one of our cows would get sick and what have you, but we would use, bizarre shit like, I can say shit. Yeah, I can. Because it says WhiteStar on the show. We'd use the bizarre stuff like Reiki. I know. We're getting way out there. Although Reiki in of itself has become much more recognized, and proud to say I had a hand in that as well, and championing that good cause of Reiki and alternative perspectives and alternative healing, and and which ultimately Reiki is just the introduction of life. You're refocusing random life vibrations and frequencies into something or into somebody to heal it. Give it more life. If it's broken and there's something missing, give it more life, which seems to be the Reiki answer, for sure. So I'm chatting up with this cowboy, and he appreciates again that none of them have gotten their injections of anything, and they've been living off the fat of the land, literally. And he looks around and says, "So which one are you going to sell me?" And I says, "Well, to be honest, I don't know." And he thought I was playing with him in some way, or trying to negotiate the better cow, and he did this dance within himself, assuming where I was coming from. And then at some point, I had to engage somehow in that conversation, in that interaction. I said, "Okay, so I'm about to get weird on you here. So I don't know which cow it is because I have to talk to the herd. When you give me a date that you would like to be able to come and pick up your cow, I'm going to have a conversation with my herd here. And at some point, I promise after that conversation, because it happens every single time, one of those cows is going to step away from the herd. One of those cows is going to make it so obvious, pick me. Pick me. I'm already the one. It's a very interesting phenomena, and it's very real and it's very tangible, and it's at 110% of the time, basically, it never let me down. I'm going to leave that with you, the viewer, as far as, where you believe that, where's that consciousness, does that make me a more ethical farmer? Or does it not? You know what I'm saying? Am I putting the pressure on the cows that one has to volunteer? I'm coming up and saying, one of you has to go and you decide what, it wasn't like a reality TV scenario where I was creating a hardship on purpose to see what psychological cow pop could happen. That's not what we're doing here. I was literally trying to engage myself in the process of life and the living and the process of the afterlife and cycles. And in my belief, in my mentality, it actually would have been unethical, maybe immoral for me to walk up to that herd, even though technically every one of them I owned, they were mine to do with as I please, as I should choose, but the weird is they were living beings, I'd already, and before the vegans, string me up, of course, I'd already done that dance long enough to know that in this lifetime, I require, this meat to sustain myself and my children. I firmly believe it has to do with blood type. I firmly believe it has to do with, but I can honestly tell you, basically, that I got to a place in my world where I cannot sustain myself without that meat. And so I decided instead to lean in, which is why I was a rancher in the first place. I wanted to be able to grow and have a personal relationship with my food. And that personal relationship, whether it was a carrot that I was planting or an apple tree, that I was planting and looking after, or a cow, chickens, the eggs, I really felt very strongly that a part of the diet that I was consuming in my world couldn't be fed by a consumer egg, by a Safeway bought steak, right? There was something that was dramatically, intangibly, and powerfully missing from that. And I have no idea if that was just me being weird psychologically or not. But I decided again to actually lean in and create the space where me and my family were being fed. And I'd have to say probably 80% of what we did eat throughout the year came from that farm someplace. Certainly all the proteins, lots of veggies as well, lots of berries, lots of, a big portion of, what we actually consumed came from that place. And we had a personal relationship with it, And, I can honestly tell you, again, maybe this is a psychological con job that I put on myself, but there was something in that for me, something really important and powerful. And so, back to the cowboy conversation that I was having, I told them kind of along these lines of, I'm going to walk up to the herd and I'm going to ask them. And at some point, one of them is going to step outside. of, that herd and make it very, very, very known, absolutely beyond the shadow of a doubt. Hey, everyone. Well, he looked at me kind of sideways, and I figured, oh yeah, here we go. I mean, I'm about to have to be put in a position of defending myself and my weirdness and what have you. And almost embarrassingly, as if he was, in some way, shape, or form, insulting me, he says, there's something to what you're saying here. He says, as you know, I'm a rancher myself, and he says, and I mean no, disrespect in any way, shape, or form, but he made it very clear to me that he didn't want to eat one of his cows because the industry demanded that he put X amount into his cows, into his, he didn't like feeding them that. He didn't like injecting them that. He didn't like, and so he was literally on my property hoping to get a cow to feed his family, not to expand his herd, right? And so there he is. He's telling me these stories of, back before, when I did actually take my own cows. He says, I drive every day, the tractor, with the, the big bale out to the cows, and while they all come running and, they start eating and stuff, my job, of course, as a rancher is to do a head count and make sure that everyone's got their limbs and no one's really being sickly, and, just, do an inspection, at least from what I can there from the comfort of the cab of the tractor anyway. And he says, I swear that they ignore the heck out of me. They're only interested in the food. Unless, me and the wife get to talking, and she sends me out and says, well, while you're looking at the herd, pick one. Pick one that you think that we need to, throw in the freezer here this year. And he like a little boy confessed, and I'll be damned, he says, if every single time one of them cows doesn't come up and eyeball me in the cab. And not just in a kind of a whimsical way either, but it's like it really walks right up to the cab and just says, hey, me. And the thumbs up sign comes. And he says, so your story ain't so weird to me. He says, but I'm not maybe as brave as you are, in sharing it, And we had a good laugh about this. And to be honest, he had all sorts of, stories. Once you open up that can of worms, everyone's got stories. If you knew how many times, honest to goodness, I've been with some skeptic, somebody who's coming at me saying, oh, there's nothing to that stuff, just a bunch of bullshit. Blah, 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 blah. First questions I ask him, have you ever had a deja vu? Have you ever had a dream that came true? Have you ever, knew damn well that phone ringing was a buddy you haven't talked to in forever? Have you ever had any of these experiences yourself? How about first impressions? There's a little bit of intuitiveness that's involved in that kind of stuff. And so, I try very much if I can to just kind of lay it down in the terms of, because I believe completely that every single person on the planet, you included, are psychic like crazy. But there are pathways in our brains that could be rewired to help us access all that information in a healthy and on-demand way. That's what I do as a metaphysical instructor, is help people access their brain, not just for psychic stuff either, right? But for increased memory, increased health, you can imagine having complete and direct access to your brain, how much value that would show up in your world over and above anything involved with extrasensory perception or psychic ability or, what have you. But when you get somebody to having a healthy brain, all the synapses, left and right hemisphere, talking to each other properly and all focused and the alchemy is right, it's amazing how psychic people get, But even without any of that stuff, I have known people who've had profound downloads and perceptions, over a cup of coffee. Just engaged in the universe and pondering, listening. The Bible's full of these things called prophets, and oracles have been around forever as well. And so every so often, there's one of us that really just steps up. And like myself, I didn't have a choice. I don't have any of those filters that most folk have. I just get all that stuff all day, every day. And as a matter of psychic self-defense, I had to create some strength and some protection and some boundaries psychically, specifically, in order just to function on this planet, for sure. So, this guy's sharing this with me, and we got to talk, and man, we were there for like a good couple hours, and he was confessing almost, to the preacher about all of his psychic experiences that he's had in this lifetime. And, I dare say that was probably a good 50% of the reason why he was actually on my property. Yeah, he was looking for an organic cow to feed his family, and he didn't like the junk he was growing. Yeah, but I also believe he tracked me down specifically because he'd heard the rumors. And I don't, if you met me, I'm not small. I'm not going to play small. I showed up as that weird guy who qualified as a farmer from weeds. Are you freaking kidding me? Oh my goodness. I remember the day that the Monsanto boys came around our property. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I don't think they ever came back. Not, not even once they ever came back, right? So, oh yes, I do remember once there was this threat of, when I was becoming certified organic, the organic people insisted, they went knocking on the doors of my fellow farmers around me, and they insisted that they didn't do any of this harmful stuff within a certain perimeter of or a certain distance from my fences, actually. And one guy actually had to put up a hedge, because he sprayed all sorts of junk, and it wasn't me enforcing it. It was, this big brother, coming down and making them. And they decided they were going to get back at me, and they sent this Monsanto lawyers around because they had access, because they're looking on my property to see if any of their Monsanto seed stuff is growing, and it's an old trick. The wind blows some Monsanto stuff on my property, and suddenly I get sued, and Monsanto steps in and takes the property, right? For sure. Well, in this case, there wasn't any of, when we went and took a look, me and this Monsanto guy, I took him serious enough. We went for a walk, absolutely, but I also took them serious enough that while we were there, and I saw some of my pepperweed. It's not mine, it's wild, right? But I was literally harvesting pepperweed off of, a couple of acres that we had. And farmers hate pepperweed. Oh my God. And once it takes hold, it takes forever to get rid of it. So yes, it was a bit of the bane of the neighbors. And admittedly, I didn't mind that it pissed them off just a little, because we'd already had this, tete-a-tete back and forth where there was this arrogance. One of them told me once that my fences needed mending and should be tighter. And my response was, I work harder to make sure my cows are happy on this side of the fence than building fences to keep them inside. In other words, if my cows have no reason to wander, why do I have to have such strong fences? Yours, on the other hand, I can understand why they want to get away from you as fast as they could. And so, yeah, let me just say the relationship wasn't great. But, push comes to shove, I'll also admit that, we showed up for one another as neighbors, right? When things went sideways, and, and cows got loose, and, and all that craziness, in their world or my world, we looked after one another. I'd lent them a bowl every now and then because they needed it. And so, anyway, back to the cowboy. We're sitting there chatting it up here, and he's confessing to the preacher about how psychic he is, and how he's always kind of wanted to know more about it and connect with it. And I invited him back, obviously, anytime you want, man. As a matter of fact, I got a lodge up on the hill there. I was in a purification ceremony lodge, a sweat lodge, some would call it, I guess. I got a lodge there, and, we gather on a regular basis. And, if you ever hear the drums, just come on up, brother, seriously. And he swore that he would. He never did, but he swore that he would that day, that, yeah, I'm going to check this stuff out, right? It's interesting because on the way out, I actually told him, he says, can I offer you something for your time, for your, this is what you do, I'm saying, as an oracle, as a, He was still doing the dance. But interestingly enough, he was still respectful of the fact that I'd given him a couple hours of my time to share, and, from my perspective, to be honest, I loved reaching another human being. I loved seeing him light up and being able to have this conversation with somebody who actually understood, who, yeah, absolutely understood that he was freaking weird, or at least he was, talking about stuff outside the box, right? And to be honest, that's one of the reasons I'm an oracle this lifetime. It's one of the things that motivated me in this lifetime was to hear those stories, because if I'm hearing it from this cowboy, and he was all cowboy logic till the cows come home, literally. He had the belt buckle and the boots and the hat, and the life and the truck, and he was walking that. including not talking about this crazy shit, and yet he had this window in his life, where he could anchor in and he could share. And, that's motivating to me. That's motivational to me. And, I did actually sell him that man a cow at some point in time. It was a bull that had separated itself from the herd, and he was pleased as pink. He couldn't have been happier. Well, what was interesting is before he left my property that day, I says, you know what? Instead of giving me any money, I tell you what, next time you're down at the A&W, water cooler, because I don't care who you are, at least in Canada anyway. in Canada, there's always this coffee shop, Tim Hortons, I guess, or before that it was A&W for the longest time, where all these farmers meet. They get up at the crack of dawn, and they water the cows and get things going, and then at some point they got it. And whether they have a reason or not, they'll make their way into town and spend $1 and hang out with all the other ranchers and cowboys and farmers. And you can see them in every town, John Deere hats galore, and anybody selling tractor parts, et cetera, knows that's where you go first, right? Because these guys know who, they know how, they know what. What I'm saying? They knew more about my tractor that I was running than I did, obviously, for sure. And they knew who I got it from. They knew the very second that it showed up on the land, And I tell him, I said, so what you can do for me, because we already know one of the reasons you're here is because I have a reputation. And so what I want you to do is next time you're in that, A&W grapevine, I want you to tell this story. I want you to tell them that, I went up and I kind of met that feller, that David Pilz, the Oracle feller. I don't even care if you're making fun of me while you tell it, but I want you to tell it. And I want to do me a favor and talk about how we spent 3 hours talking about the weird shit and you couldn't have been happier. Because I believe right now you couldn't have been happier. I'm tickled pink. You're kind of a wise guy, and he shared a whole bunch of. But the bottom line is that what I wanted in payment was next time I came up, hanging around all the other boys, just say so. Just tell the story. And that did matter. And it wasn't right away. They didn't come rushing up, of course, but I could absolutely tell there was a couple of times after that, when, maybe when they looked at me, their eyes were a bit softer, right? Maybe when they, it was a little bit more curiosity, right? I even had one of our other neighbors who wasn't a stranger before, but he sure got all chummy, for a month after that too, and asking all sorts of questions about angels, actually, believe it or not, and so, I share this because, of course, and we started with the going off this dialogue of, the weirdness and who's weird and who ain't weird. And, we're all freaking weird, in one way or another, but I guess some of us just need permission. I guess some of us just need to be in that space and in that right environment, and again, that's one of the reasons I went pro, for sure. It's one of the reasons that I have had this amazing career as a psychic, and I use that word psychic so blatantly and so casually, whereas I can appreciate in some people's worlds, that's still a bit of a rubbing the cap the wrong way word. It's very interesting, but I've come a long way on my journey. I'm new to this network, this, adventures through connection, and, with the gang that's here. I'm no stranger to the gang that's here. These are old friends of mine, and we've been dancing this for quite a few years now, and I suspect they're going to be family for the rest of my days, right? Adventures for Connection, and Tanya, and of course Alex, and I've been doing this for quite some time, and Norm was new to me, but I'm really excited about the tribe. I'm really excited about how things are coming together. But life hasn't always been that obvious. And the reason I'm hesitating is because, to be perfectly honest, it's not obvious now. When I get into alpha state or even theta, and I access the universe, I access the radio stations that are broadcasting, if you like, out there in the universe, and I put my ears on, Yeah, my oracle ears, which reminds me of my CB days. It's, yeah. Hey, oracle, you got your ears on? Yeah, Um, when I access the universe through whatever tool, this one here is called Prince. It's a 14-pound smoky quartz crystal ball, and it's through this I can literally see and perceive the universe. When to read a crystal ball, you have to actually find what's called a sweet spot, and the sweet spot, if you actually pay attention, on every single sphere, every single crystal ball, even if it's an onyx or something, and you can't quite see to the center of it, but I promise that they're still there. That there is on every crystal ball a space that you can actually see through the crystal to the center of the ball, and that's what I call the sweet spot. Because if you look into and through the crystal ball through that sweet spot, what's that? And you actually want to be looking past it. In other words, it's kind of like martial arts, when you're throwing a punch, if this is the wall, you want to actually be allowing your inertia and your energy to go past, where your striking point is going to be. You want your energy to continue going through it. Well, the same thing visually, when you're looking through a crystal ball, you want to be looking almost at the wall behind it, so that your peripheral vision comes into perspective. One of those 3D, picture books, where you hold the book up to your nose and then you pull it away slowly and your eyes do this all buggy, wongy thing. And then eventually you see, boom, this 3D image pops out of all the little squiggly lines. If you can do that, you can read a crystal ball. You can actually see spirits. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do if your muscles are capable of casually doing that, like even from across the room, Um, cool, love it. And so, yeah, you have to be in the alpha state. You can't do it from beta. You can't do it from just casual conversation, right? But looking into and through a crystal ball and through its sweet spot is going to get you to a place where your peripheral vision is suddenly going to be perceiving what's going on right here. And some people, like this obviously is one that has inclusions in it, cracks and, geometric shapes and all sorts of other things going on. I've also got other ones around here now somewhere that are completely clear. And both of them have value. I like the way the light catches the little nuances that take place in this smoky quartz. And to be honest, in my mind's eye, like a teacup reading, if you like, they form into shapes. And sometimes just the way the light comes in, it actually creates this prism of color that, to be perfectly honest, in that rainbow, that prism is so many images and things going on inside me while I'm perceiving it, that ideally that's crystalmancy, that's scrying, right? Now you can scry with any reflective surface. You could literally scry off of a chrome bumper, literally. I mean, if you just applied yourself appropriately to it. But just like anything else, the right tool, it will enable you to do a much better job. I mean, you could smear with your hands the paint on the wall, but maybe using a brush and a roller might get you a little better finish, right? For sure. So by using an actual crystal and a crystal ball, there's a reason why there's a cliche there, because you can use, again, all sorts of tools, a chrome bumper, or again, any reflective surface. One of my fun tools was a magic bowl, actually. I took an oak bowl that was relatively shallow in nature, right? Painted the inside of it on this really gloss black, and then what I would do is I would just fill it up with water, obviously, and then I would treat that like a crystal ball as well, and the reflection off of the water itself is what I would use for scrying. And instead of looking into and through a crystal ball to get to through the other side, instead with that water I would kind of just dive deep into that depth of darkness, right? And the images would pop out in that direction also. And so I share this because there's all sorts of ways to get there, lots of ways to get there. And when I tap into the universe these days, there's some pretty glorious stuff going on. I gotta tell you, again, timelines. This is probably the biggest one. I can share this here because this is about being weird and kooky and making maybe even this blasphemous, perspectives. But I don't believe we're on the same timeline we were at the beginning of the year. I actually believe, to be honest, and the year, and this February has been a rough year, because I believe that there's all sorts of slipping and sliding going on around these days, Mandela effect. Mandela effects and timelines crashing these dynamics. Yes, I've heard the conspiracy, believe it or not, that the Mandela effect was a psyop created by the feds, basically so that they could change history by modifying, by creating some of these. As far as I'm concerned, that's the conspiracy theory. Whereas the original dynamic of the Mandela effect has a lot more to do with timelines actually being, I don't want to use the word collapsed, I want to use maybe assimilated. All these variable dynamics. And what I mean by timelines is that, there's another time, another dimension, if you like, where I might even be in front of the camera, but I might be wearing red, on one side, and on the other side, I might be wearing black, and on one direction, and it's ever so slightly different. One side I could be completely bald, and the other side I got this full beard going on, right? For sure. So they're going to have so many of the different conditions are going to be similar, but there's going to be some slight variations. And the further you go out from the center timeline, the primary timeline, and that's the one we're living here right now. The secondary timelines, Earth 1 and Earth 2 and Earth 1200, etc., the further out you go, the more changes are likely to be made. So technically, as we're experiencing this experiment that has been going on for thousands and thousands of years through all the different incarnations and civilizations and what have you, our relationship with time is so cool because technically we have been and are doing everything. Because, and maybe not so much anymore, but all these timelines existed simultaneously. When we get out of this spectrum that we call time, this relationship with it, technically everything's happened all at once. Happened, will happen, all of these dynamics, and it's a bit boggling when you wrap your head around it, and I promise we're going to cover that in depth. But at this point, there's a lot of shifting, there's a lot of slippery, there's a lot going on here that's really, really, really powerful stuff. CERN has something to do with this, definitely, the technological dynamics of things. And CERN, has a lot. It's fascinating to me. I mean, the scientists put up the largest Stargate on the planet after years and years and years and years and years of researching Stargates. And we really didn't really pay attention. You know what I'm saying? There was even one younger fella, I can't remember his name, who declared that when they fired that thing up, that we actually all shifted from this to a secondary timeline right next to it. I think he disappeared, unfortunately, died suddenly or something crazy like that. But, know too much, or maybe they just erased him from that timeline, etc. Whatever conspiracy or dynamic you think that they are, dancing with. But I believe that. I really do. There's this part of me that when I perceive and I look into my crystal ball, now, I don't believe that maybe my opinion has more value than any other human on the planet. The difference is that I have this history of predictions in my world. I already have 30 years of, in the trenches. I did minimum 1,000 consultations in a year, and it's all recorded. And so my accuracy is huge. I'm proud of it, absolutely, because, if that accuracy had dropped for whatever reason, and I wasn't actually showing up and helping people, I would have stopped. I would have gone to contracting. I would have gone back to ranching. I would have, in some way, shape, or form, found some way to show up in this world and try and make a difference. But I wouldn't have showed up as an oracle, fortune telling, divination, and predicting, all of that stuff. But damn it, I'm good at it. Absolutely. I've been trained remote viewer, and of course I'm a scryer, and all these wonderful tools and dynamics. But to be honest, the biggest tool that I have, I'm a tool, the biggest tool that I have is me. is literally just being able to sit in a quiet space, feeling comfortable, feeling safe, and talk to the universe. To put my ears on and allow all the information and just kind of, if you like, to flip through the stations, right? And see what's being presented to me and what isn't being presented to me. The tools are cool. Yes, I can scry with a crystal ball and tarot. Oh, tarot. Oh my goodness. The tarot cards have become such a good friend of mine over the lifetime. They're just pieces of paper with ink on them, right? They're made by like US Games and other game, like factories, right? For sure. Especially these days. I mean, you can get tarot cards with anything. I got Star Wars deck behind me here. I've got oh my goodness, I've got tarot card decks literally that have to do with so many different variations and themes and stories, and King Arthur versions, and I've even got some naughty decks that would make you blush. So I don't use them very often, and to be honest, the reason I even stepped into them, not necessarily as a collector, but sometimes I get into conversations with my clients that aren't about boundaries in their worlds that maybe I don't have as much. I come across as pretty much of a blowhard and willing to talk about anything, but I got a shy side too, and I got some total strangers sitting across from me. How do I even begin start talking about sexuality, boundaries, There's I'm a bit of a gentleman as well, and so there's this dynamic in my world where anchoring in and pulling out one of those naughty decks over tarot, sometimes a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I don't have to speak those 1,000 words. Instead, I can just say, you see this card here right now? Well, take a picture and, go home. We'll talk to you in a week. Totally, right? And so it's very interesting. The tarot, and I got my very first tarot deck when I was 11 years old, is the exploration of all the archetypes. It literally, in those 78 cards, is every potential encounter that or experience that a human can have, literally. And it's interesting because it sticks with the archetypes. It sticks with, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It sticks with, these very profound, in-depth relationship with who we are as a species, as a people, showing up in so much that it has survived for already, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And I mean, they're still not even quite sure exactly where tarot started from, but it may have something to do with, the gypsies and, it being illegal to sell news. Like here it is in Canada, we can't share the news on our Facebook and stuff like that, right? And so maybe we have to start using tarot cards again, Even the Christian ladies, there's a game called Whist. And I'm sure some of you have heard of it if you're, churchgoers. Well, Whist was technically the tarot. Way back when. It's a very interesting dynamic, and our 52 card playing deck, that's again just a game, a tool, basically, I believe basically originated from the tarot in of itself, because it wasn't illegal to play games with people. It wasn't illegal to share stories, but it was illegal to share the news. And that was because you had one king who didn't want their peasants to know that, the other king was treating their peasants ever so slightly better, right? Because that would cause problems, right? If they're all suffering equally, then awesome, right? No different than what's going on right now all over the planet, right? With the clamping down and censorship and, and all that stuff. And ideally, it literally is kind of one of the last signs that civilizations could put. It's done. It's finished, right? And I couldn't be more excited, honest to goodness, than to see some of this stuff. And I know that people are enraged, and you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be in this position of the righteous indignation. You can't muzzle me, and you shouldn't, and all this crazy stuff. And honest to goodness, I just see it and smile and go, yeah, you need to be pissed off just a little bit and stand up for who you are and how you are and what you think are your rights and what you think they aren't, all those dynamics. Because at the end of the day, it's going to become important that you understand who you are and how you're walking and how you're talking, because you're about to be put in charge of you, and that takes accountability and responsibility. So it's one thing, back to the teenage years, when we were growing up, we're arguing with our parents about how we have a right, to so many things, right? You can't come into my room. Well, it was your parents' room. you're living there by the grace of your parents. They're feeding you, clothing you, they're da 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 da, and yet you still have this dynamic of entitlement, you know, for sure. And you know what? I'm digressing. You know, basically, we all know that, you know, this is kind of the way of the world, and we're all, as human species right now, growing, and we're becoming that next step. We're becoming that best version of ourselves. You know, but in order to get there, so many of us require that angst. You know, for sure. Cool. Just I'm loving what you're having to share here, basically. You know, and yes, everyone has gifts. Everyone. The tools, be it, you know, tarot cards or crystal balls or runes. You know, I make my own runes. Um, literally is my belief system and my teaching that I've received that one should make their own runes. You know, it's best to actually make them out of yew wood. Has been my teachings. I have a set here of antler as well. They're amazing, and pretty much any fruit bearing tree. You know, wood is very, very common. The yew wood, Y-E-W, not Y-O-U, wood. The yew takes the longest to become a tree. It takes forever to grow. But when you do get a decent sized yew tree, it's old and ancient and tough as nails, probably even tougher than oak, I think, you know. But and the reason why yew wood is because it has already in of itself some mystical properties, you know, according to the Druids and, you know, beyond mistletoe and what have you. But they also, you know, because it has this age, you know, the whales are the wisdom keepers on the planet, and they live long enough to be able to pull that off, you know, for sure. And so the yew wood itself is so much more revered when it comes to actually making runes, but it should be made by you. Literally, each piece should be, you know, hand created and engraved and all that, and even go so far as to, you know, maybe even a prick of blood, you know, on each piece while you're in deep ceremony, fasting, etc. All that stuff, all the rituals. You can do the same thing making your own tarot deck. The Order of the Golden Dawn that's out there. In order for you to actually become a certain, you know, somebody in their organization, you have to create your own deck. You literally have your own imagery, your own, you know. And I made one in the past just for giggles. I don't even know where it went. I should pull that out one of these days. I just did all the artwork on it. I didn't actually create it, you know, or get it published. Um, but and so, you know, we can anchor into these tools. We can give them so much power. But I got to tell you, and again, it boils down to that our real juice, you know, the biggest and most powerful tool that any one of us has at our disposal is ourselves. You know, the ability to get the heck out of our own way, the ability to, and I'm talking about from my perspective. I got to tell you, I receive so much stuff all day, every day from the world and from the universe around me. Yeah, it's interesting, but I'm still human, you know? Again, when I see the big picture, we're dissecting timelines, for Pete's sakes. We're, you know, we're Doctor Stranging out there in the universe, you know, skipping through dimensions and, and, you know, facing off demons and devils and, you know, and playing hopscotch with gods and, you know, and you know, maybe none of that's true. Maybe that's just some weird, bizarre, you know, place that I go to. I daydream, if you like it. You know, it's real to me and it's tangible. And there's a whole bunch of times when I can pull stuff out of that weird space into the real world also, and it shows up and manifests. And as an oracle, that's been one of the secrets to my success. Is I literally have 1 foot here and 1 foot there. You know, I was I was grown by a boomer. Oh, you know what that's like. You know, honest to goodness, quit your crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Right? You know, get your feet back on the ground here, you know, put your boots on, all the cliches, you know, cliche, these boomers. I don't know where they got this stuff, right? But kept on reminding me that, you know, I needed to stay on the ground. I needed to stay anchored. I needed to stay here in this real world. And, you know, bless my parents. I assume I probably wasn't easy to parent, you know, because again, here I am in the real world and there. I can also share that I grew up real fast and I found out I was real capable real quick, because when I'm functioning in that other world and I can bring it into this physical world, everything lines up and David gets what he wants. I don't even have to be an ass about it. I just align, if you want alchemically, you know, I just align the universe together. And I'm able to express, even as a young boy, able to show up and express to the universe what my desires are, and whew, there it is. You know, this is interesting because, and I've danced with this my entire life, is the dynamic of self-fulfilling prophecies and such as well. I'm teaching Karuna Reiki right now to a group of students, and one of them yesterday or day before came out with this question of interference. These students are really starting to feel and recognize the kind of power, the kind of juice they have now, and how that has influence, how that has impact in their clients' worlds. And every good healer, I don't care who you are, or psychic, or psychologist, or doctor, you know, we really have to get to that place, and I hope it happens repeatedly, in your world. But if you are a person in service of others in this way, there has to be those times when you anchor in and wonder if you should just not be screwing with it. I've had situations in my past where a little old lady come into my world at a psychic fair, plops herself down in front of me, and says, just do what you do here. And I'm normally way more conscientious about sharing this kind of news, but in the moment she had me all flustered. And so I turned and I poked the cassette into my cassette recorder. Now it's dating me, I know. Back in the cassette recorder, hit play and record at the same time, turn back to her, no aura. No aura. If I look at anybody in this life, basically, and they don't have an aura, that means they have, within 3 months, they've already checked out. It's just a matter of their physical body following suit in some way, shape, or form. First things out of my mouth are, oh, you're passing. And she starts to cry, and I start to backpedal. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong again. I was just still kind of new to this game. It was quite a few years back, And her response was, don't you dare shut up. I shouldn't even be here. I'm a good Christian lady, and I'm probably going to go to hell for it. But I thought, what the heck? I'm already crazy anyway. She says, I feel that I'm dying. There's something not right. There's something off. And my doctor says I'm good. And I've talked to, my pastor, and I've talked to, and she says, I was just driving by out front and something compelled me to come in. I saw a psychic fair, and I thought, what have I got to lose? I'm already crazy. And the minute I sit down, the first words out of your mouth are exactly how I feel. Don't you dare shut up. And so we had an amazing connection, me and this total stranger in that moment. Obviously that moment's bigger than both of us, but yet that moment, was necessary for both of us, because that woman did pass away within 3 months. And I know that because she left the cassette recording that I'd given her of that reading, of that conversation that her and I had, right next to a letter. And her family found it after she was in a car accident. Now, I know they found it because when they contacted me, they weren't nice. They weren't friendly. Their mom had zigged in that moment instead of zagged because I said so. The dynamic of self-fulfilling prophecies, the dynamic of, presenting something to somebody in their world that may or may not be true, but they believe it's true enough that they go about making it happen, right? And I swear to goodness, I actually backed off doing any kind of readings and fortune telling and what have you for a little while after that. Well, I chewed on that, and it's now, to be honest, in my practice that I have this no edit, and like it or not, again, I have this, like I mentioned earlier, I even have some conversations that are a little uncomfortable for me sometimes. But if my client's coming into my world and I'm looking at them directly and it's obvious to me what's going on, it should also, before our conversation is over, be obvious to my client, because that's what they're paying me for. If they come to see me and I'm this doctor and does a once over and you got this huge boil out of your neck, saying it's about to kill you dead, and I lean in and say, no, you're just fine, take this pill, kind of an idea, I'm not providing them the service that they are paying me for. And I'm certainly not being integral, and so it was from that moment, and there's many moments since, basically, that I've argued and danced with this, and I recommend that every one of your practitioners will. And I'm hoping that every single one of them also get to that place, and this is my opinion, where they get to this place of no edit, right? Be that clear conduit. And the answer to my client, my student, who was asking that same question about healing, are we interfering? by actually introducing healing, by actually offering healing, by actually potentially even healing a space that, you know, maybe they needed to hang on to that a little longer, or maybe that was supposed to create a certain outcome in their world that we are interfering with. You know, my answer along the same lines as what I just shared with you is that I actually believe that if you are offering a service of that nature to somebody, take it really serious. Um, and know that those people who are supposed to be hearing from you will find their way to you. If you're listening to me here right now and you thought, yeah, maybe I should go see this guy, probably you're supposed to connect and have a chat at some point in time, right? You know, I'm also in a position where I'm not going to sell it. I'm not going to reel you in. I'm not going to salesman you, because I know there's going to be at the right time. It's going to be perfect, you know, for both of us to be able to connect and have that moment where I can look at your world and say, no editing, here's what I see, you know, and I can share with you. You know, there's been a few awkward moments over the decades, of course, but for the most part, it's been so wonderful to be able to look and actually see my clients. You know, I had one lady who I know we're coming top of the hour. I'll leave you another story here. One client comes to see me, and first thing I say out of my mouth, and I'm looking at her and saying, figure skating? No, I mean, absolutely no negativity or disrespect, but this lady was kind of, you know, a little big for figure skates. We'll just put it that way, right? And certainly a little bit older. You know, she wasn't going to be a figure skater anymore, but there was something about this, and she'd always been a part of her dream, and it had all been part of her passion and her power and all that stuff. And you know, I looked right at her and I downloaded all this information and went, figure skating? Are you kidding me? You don't even like skating. And she goes, you're right. And that caught her off guard. And I caught her off guard, but I kept on still chewing on the information that I got. And I says, no, 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 no. You hate skating. Reason why figure skating is because you like the costumes. You love the sequins. You like the choreography. You like the showmanship that surrounds figure skating. And I'm proud to say that now she makes a living creating costumes and you know, other, you know, outfits, and encourage and is a part of the industry, her dream, in a way that's actually a little bit more authentic. Whereas she had, honest to goodness, thought for sure that her figure skating dream was kaput because she couldn't strap on a set and twirl in the air herself, right? You know, and so I guess it boils down to this at the top of the hour I'm going to share with you is that when I look back on my career, when I look back on my life, all 56-ish years of it, um, and and the difference I've made just because I showed up and I refused to edit, and I wanted to be a full of not just moral compass. That's still such an individual thing for me. But aside from the tools, I showed up, you know, and offered to that person in my world something authentic, you know, something real, something very tangible, something that you know, there wasn't any plastic involved, you know. As today in our world is going to get even more wiggly, and the truth and reality becomes less tangible, less less predictable. I want you to know that you have within you an oracle. It's bigger, way bigger than any of the tools. The ability to have 1 foot here and 1 foot there is actually your birthright. And yeah, if you want to come see me, I'll teach you how. You know, I mean, to do it effortlessly. But even if you and I never speak again, I know you can do it even without me. I know that you are doing it. And I'd love for you, you know, yes, I'll see you next week at the same time, same bat station, of course. And I'm going to keep on sharing what I can, you know, here on this podcast, you know, and thank you so much, Adventures for Connections, for this opportunity, you know, you provided for me to be able to share. But even if, you know, this is the last time around, you freaking rock. And you are a goddess, God. And you're already walking in ways that you wish you would be walking in. But you have to take accountability for that, and you have to claim it. And you have to trust in yourself. Because you can't trust in much else these days. It's all slippery. Is that what I wanted to share with you today? I think it is. If I didn't get to any of the questions below, I'll do my best to jump on and answer them, in person, but I got in a bit of a rant here. And you can expect a lot more of these because I'm an elder, and us elders seem to rant and rave and carry on, and somewhere in there, maybe there's some teachings and a moral to the story, and maybe it's just the ravings of a madman. I don't know. See you there, guys.